Drinking Bros, presented by GhostBed.com.
Yes, welcome to Drinkin Bros Sports, everyone. We've got a fancy doctor in the house today, Dan. D'Anthony.
House of learned doctors.
Yes. We've got Dr. Jen Welter in the show. You might know her as the first female coach in the NFL. She also hosts a popular podcast called The Juke. Welcome to the show, Jen. How are you?
What's up, guys? How we doing?
You throwing up deuces to start off with?
I am. I mean, we were talking about Florida Man offline, and as I told you guys, like, I'm from Florida.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of Florida men, hence the reason why I'm single and need to be drinking with the Drinking Bros. I don't know how else to put it.
Where are you at in Florida? That'll tell you how Florida you actually are.
I was born and raised in Vero Beach, Florida.
Oof.
An actual native, believe it or not.
Man, look, we have a rule on this show that we tell all of our listeners: don't date women in beach towns or vacation towns because they're just crazy. You probably grew up with a bunch of weird dudes just coming in who are tourists all the time, and then you had to kind of date the tourists and then have a long distance relationship with the tourists. Is that you or no?
No, we don't date tourists. We tend to make fun of them because they get really bad sunburn. See, in Florida, we're smart enough to know how to negotiate the weather. So we would play darts or pool or something like that midday while all the tourists were on the beach at the times that are really not habitable.
Right.
And then after the rain would clear all of them out, that's when we would go to the beach. So you gotta have a game plan. So we really kind of missed the tourists unless we were making fun of them from behind a pool table or a dartboard, which means don't ever try and go with a Florida native on those because they will probably win.
Every single time, one would imagine.
Oh, yeah.
Look, you were the first ever female coach that was coaching like big boy shit in the NFL. On this show, I have, full disclosure, been critical of that in the past. Okay. I have a laundry list of questions for you here, just because I want to know.
Well, I'm not particularly good at laundry. I'm better at football. So feel free to give me the laundry list, and then I'll send you my dirty laundry, and you can handle it for me.
Perfect.
I use a wash and fold. I don't do anything. I don't do manual labor.
No, Dan doesn't believe in it. Dan doesn't believe in it.
I agree. There's a reason why it's called manual labor. I'll pass.
Yeah, exactly. No, in all sincerity, the reason I've been critical, in the past, is, I was, we always do our research here on this show. Did you grow up playing football?
I grew up loving football and not having an opportunity to play football. Women and girls really didn't play when I grew up, though I grew up in Vero Beach, Florida, where it's like a way of life. So I had a love of the game. I was a multi-sport athlete, dominated pretty much every sport I played except basketball because I am 5'2". So
sure.
That's just a height selection thing. And then when I got to college, I found rugby for the first time. So got to play rugby. And that was the first time I really got to tackle, but it's something I wanted to do always.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Did they just not allow it there? And I know this sounds crazy, but a friend of the show, Nick Mangold, who's been on a bunch of times, his sister actually played high school football. So was it just not allowed where you lived?
She's also like a champion power lifter too, isn't she?
Yeah, later.
Right, so
yes.
When did she get to play?
2000. So I want to say.
Was it that long ago?
Yeah, it was a while ago. I want to say.
So I graduated high school in 1996. Now I will tell you, here I was captain of soccer team 2 years in a row. I was in the first graduating class of Sebastian River High School. So I chose to leave one of the iconic franchises in Florida because I thought it would be great to be a leader of a new school. And so by default, our football team was pretty terrible because a lot of the guys who were really good had stayed at Vero High. And, I watched it, and my boyfriend was the captain of the football team. I was the one who he used to win bets against rookies all the time because I could outbench them, these kinds of things. And I used to watch it. And the high school football coach, his name was Randy Bethel, played for UM. His son then went on to carry that legacy. Bethel was in training camp with the Pats at one time. I was his favorite soccer player because I was 13 and I took everybody out. So I told him one day, I was like, Coach Bethel, you need to let me play football because I could help your football team. And he looked at me and I was ready, right? Like if he would have said, you can't do it, you're not a good enough athlete, I would have been suited up the next day, no doubt. And what he said was, Miss Welter, you are a heck of an athlete and you probably could help my football team, but I'm going to ask you not to play. And let me tell you why. I'm a football guy. I have been one my whole life. You are an athlete. You are going to come out there and make some guy look bad. Then him or one of his teammates is going to cheap shot you and I'm going to kill him and go to jail. Please don't do it. And it wasn't a matter of you're not a good enough athlete. It was literally him saying, we don't have a culture for that. And that's really different. So could you learn to play football? Absolutely. Could I have learned to play football? Absolutely. But culturally, was it there yet? Not even close, especially not in Florida.
Well, let's take just height-wise, since you were talking about it earlier, because my wife's the same height as you are. Essentially, she's pretty small. You know, with your weights, because I'm assuming you probably looked very similar to what you do now. I mean, you don't look that much older than high school, which is probably a testament to just staying in shape and everything else. But what position other than kicker do you think you would have qualified for in high school had the coach said, let's put you in?
Probably could have been a wide receiver, was very fast, very quick, actually, I would say. So before the slot was really a sexy thing, I could have been a slot receiver. Also read really well on defense. I was a sweeper in soccer, never got beat. So something from probably a safety position, more of a free than a strong, but really read well and seldom got beat there. So there are a lot of things. I ended up going on to play men's pro football and was a running back there because of that quickness out of my stance and ability to read blockers and use them to my advantage. So, you know, it really just depends. A lot of those things are putting people in positions of success and then using them in a way that it's an advantage, not a disadvantage. I think, frankly, I could have been the best decoy of all time coming, say, from the slot, because it would have been a disadvantage getting jammed off the line. But I would have been the best decoy on the face of the planet because, you know, even when I played in men's pro football, the driving force of the defensive coordinator was no matter what happens, the girl doesn't score, which means you could be the best decoy of all time. It just needs to be an understanding of where you could be used to be a strategic advantage on the team as opposed to a disadvantage because, oh gosh, we feel bad that we have a girl. No, if we have a girl, she should be an advantage because you know she's going to draw the attention of the other team.
Do NFL teams, what do you got, 53 people in that active roster?
I believe so, yeah.
Do you typically keep a decoy on a 53-person roster in a league where injuries are pretty prevalent? I mean, that seems like a big risk. And the reason I say
what
that
else do you
is
call
because
Tim Tebow right now?
Tim Tebow is a publicity stunt. He will not make that roster. There's 0% chance he'll make that roster. And that's one of the things I was actually going to bring up. So he spent his entire life playing football.
First of all, hold on. But you can find a role for anybody. And at that time, we're not talking about an NFL roster. We're talking about a high school roster that was not very good. I can tell you right now, I could have contributed to that roster.
In high school, in high school. Yeah. Okay, in high school. Okay,
there's a good chance for that.
I mean, that's a very different question.
Yeah, we had a guy on the winningest high school football coach of all time. He was on the show. Look, he had a bunch of girl kickers on his team, and they were just lighting people up on that documentary on YouTube. So high school, yes. As you get into college, obviously, in pros, physically, you're going to take a beating.
It'd be rough. It'd be rough to maintain the muscle mass.
It's also access to coaching.
Yeah.
Because there are girls who, speed-wise, even size-wise, look at some of the basketball players, right? They could be great in those positions. Have they gotten access and opportunity to develop the skills to be placed in those positions? That's different.
Well, let me ask you then, you think there should be a separate league for women, or do you think, hey, let's just keep the NFL, and then keep men and women together, and if they want to try out or want to play, go for it?
Well, first of all, football is the only sport that doesn't have parity at any problem or at any level. That's a problem. It's a great game. Girls are going to want to play. Boys are going to want to play. Do I think that the ultimate destination for women to be able to play football should be against men? No, because then you're always talking about an exception, never a place where she has the opportunity to rule. But do I think that if you don't set up a feeder system and a place where they have the opportunity to play, that you're always going to have women who either are aspiring to play against the guys or don't get an opportunity to play? Sure, because we're not providing that. So there is women's tackle football. There are places for women to play. I represented on the U.S. national team twice, led the team in tackles in 2010, so women's football is up and coming, both in the flag space and the tackle space. However, yeah, there's always going to be a size disadvantage. In no other sports do we set it up, even in whether it's MMA, whether it's boxing, even wrestling now, where you're not saying that there's an opportunity for women to compete against women, and that's part of the problem.
Okay, so that I can understand. I guess walk me through rugby then. Was there a female rugby team in your college? Because we'll jump from high school to college, and then we'll get into your professional career. Was there an all-female rugby team at your college, and what college did you go to?
Yes, there was an all-female rugby team. Rugby is a collegiate sport. It's also a sport that you can play at the Olympic level and internationally as a professional. So I played rugby for Boston College for all 4 years.
It's pretty rare that rugby.
Oh, damn.
It's pretty rare that rugby is a varsity sport, though, even for men, though, right?
Yeah, I don't think we had it at Ohio State. That's what I was asking. I went to Ohio State, and I don't believe we had it when I was in school
My
there.
brother played his freshman year at Citadel, but it wasn't varsity, I don't think.
Yeah.
It is a sport that has been growing in terms of varsity. Look at it probably on trajectory a little bit behind lacrosse, but on an international scene, there's women and men's. And yes, it is a varsity sport depending on the school. Penn State traditionally has had it for a long time. It is more popular probably in the Northeast than it is in some other areas. Stanford has a huge, they are the leaders across the nation traditionally in rugby. So yes, it can be a varsity sport.
Yeah, we have a host on our network, Eric Tanzi, who plays religiously every Saturday. Him and Bradley Yandel, the Yandy Man, plays a lot as well. They love it, and yes, you're right, it is growing. I only said that not as a demeaning thing. I literally at Ohio State at the time that I went to school there, we did not have it, and it was intramurals. So did you get a scholarship there? Like, did you get to play on full ride? Do they have that for women?
Well, they do. So those are two different questions. I didn't even know rugby existed before I went to college. So I discovered it in college.
Oh, okay.
Because I had always wanted to play football, and I had opportunities to play soccer going to college, but Boston College had one of the top 10 business schools in the country. So I chose academics as my path. And when I got there, that's when I saw rugby for the first time. Actually, this is rugby. So that's a flashback.
Oh, yeah.
There.
And you made the right decision.
Front row.
But hey, you made the right decision. Boston College is a great school. Academically, it is next to impossible to get into.
As of 2017, there were more women's varsity rugby teams than there were men's nationally from all three NCAA divisions.
That makes sense. Look, if you're looking at it, I understand that. So then after college, you graduated BC. You have a degree from one of the best colleges in the nation. What next for you? What did you do? Because I know you played for 14 years or something like that?
Yeah, it was 14, 15 years. Seasons ended up differently. So what happened is I actually got recruited for the under-23 national team in rugby, at which point I think they realized that I was 5'2", 130 pounds, because as a prop, I was literally half the size of everybody I was going up against. So I did not make the U.S. rugby team.
Yeah, but if you're a winger in rugby, even as a dude, your size it matters to some degree. But if you're a winger, it doesn't really matter that much. If you're fast enough.
If you're a winger,
yeah.
Sure.
But you didn't do that.
If you're a prop,
yeah,
not so much.
Right.
I was in the front row of the scrum.
But you had just started playing the sport too. Why would they at your size throw you there instead of as a winger if you're fast? I don't get that.
Because I was so strong and because I was dominating. I was so good at it that I was recruited for the under-23 national team. So yeah, that's a thing. And we had a very small team and not everybody could do it. I was coached by one of the US Eagles who immediately put me there. It was not even a question. And I would win the scrums. I mean, I was beating people in weightlifting competitions through high school. I started lifting when I was 14. Like, I was a strong person, and your leverage is an advantage, particularly in the front row of the scrum. If I can get underneath you and lift your feet to the position where you are not heels down, your toes are off, which meant all I had to do was elevate just a little bit. Your whole size advantage goes away.
Low man
Plus,
runs.
if I have a great position on you in the scrum as a loose head prop, and I can get your hips to separate slightly from your hooker, I can make the entire scrum collapse.
Right.
So I was really good and really well coached. Being undersized, one of the things that you have to do is be very precise on form. Going to the national team level, the difference was the coach said, I have people, and she was the Harvard Radcliffe coach, which they were notoriously tops in the country. We played them regularly. She was one of the people who wanted me for that tryout. She said, Welter, at this level, I can teach other people to do what you do, but I cannot double your size no matter what. So, you can only dominate with what you've got, but whoever your coach is has a different philosophy. If I was on a team where they had other people who could do what I do, and were lacking on speed, then maybe that's where they would have put me. But we had a small team at Boston College, and I was one of the only ones who was willing to take on that tough job. So, you do it all the time, and you see guys who progress into, say higher levels of other sports, and the only way they can take them is if they would have switched their positions or things like that, but they had to do it based on the system they were in or the team they were on. So the same thing with me. But as I got into it, had a degree from Boston College, which I still find funny. I have my BS degree. So you better recognize you're going to get BS and a little bit of the business, no matter what. And, I started working corporate for the first time, and yet I was teaching aerobics before and after work. And I was playing flag football on weekends, and the general manager of the Mass Mutiny called the flag league I was playing in and said, do you have any girls who you think could play tackle? And full disclosure, coming from rugby, I'd never stopped tackling. So they were probably like, please take her. She doesn't pull flags anyway, which I really didn't. So that's when I got recruited to the Mass Mutiny, and then played for them for 2 seasons, then the Dallas Dragons for 1, the Dallas Diamonds for 10, the U.S. national team in 2010 and 13, and then the Texas Revolution in 2014.
And what's the salary like when you get there? I'm assuming it's probably not enough to quit your day job, right?
So the first time I ever got paid for playing what they would call, well, I refer to as pro football, because it was the top level, but we couldn't afford the professional. That was way out of our budget. The first time I got a check was in 2014. We had just won our first championship. We went 12-0, undefeated, and we got a check for $12.
Why $12?
It was $1 a game.
No way. That's great. And the reason I ask about this is I dated somebody, and I hope this isn't insulting, way back in the day, who was in the lingerie football league. And she would get the shit beat out of her.
I've got a lot of friends who do that, actually.
And
a bunch of my military friends do that still.
It was aggressive and hardcore, and she would come home with bruises and all kinds of other shit. And I was just like, holy shit, how much are you getting paid for this? And it was nothing. I mean, they were just doing it for fun and like social media aspects and things like that. And I was like, wow, why do you want to do this?
Yeah, for us, it's a little different than, the lingerie football league. Like the way that they're pitched is that it's a gateway to modeling, acting, some of those other things.
Correct. Yeah. Yep.
For us who were playing, for me, it was a challenge to change society through sport, right? They call football the final frontier for women in sports. And so for us that were sacrificing and not doing it for social media likes, who were really playing the game the way it's supposed to be played, 11 on 11, full gear, fully padded, same game as the guys. It was, if this is the final frontier and we are here, when we can change the sport, we can also shift culture. And so it was really a belief that this sport, especially in America, is something that has to change for us to truly start to look at what equality is.
Well, why does that doesn't? Let me push back a little bit on that. I mean, no one's entitled to anything. Ultimately, sports is a TV show, right? The reason that it exists is because you can sell advertising on it. Otherwise, no one would ever make any money.
Not with, you're going to tell me that sports exists just to make money? You're going to tell me that when you go play backyard.
I'm telling you that the only reason that cable television is still on the air, the only reason that network television even exists right now is because of live sports.
That's not why sports exists.
Well, it's why it exists. It's why people can do it professionally.
Professionally.
It's fundamental in what we do.
No. But professionally, to get paid, it is pure entertainment. We talk about it. Yeah, we talk about this on the show all the time because, like, look, you take the men's U.S. soccer team. They're fucking terrible.
They shouldn't even exist. I feel like there should be they should be in relegation and not allowed to play on the international level until they can actually win. Frankly, I mean, it's embarrassing, and the women light people up all the time.
Yeah, I mean, they're world champions, so it's like it goes both ways. But professional sports is just simply to sell ads. You know, I was in Hollywood for a long time. Like, fuck it, they don't give a shit what you put on the air as long as it's making money. Yeah. The Masked Singer is the best goddamn example of that. Like, that's the highest rated show on TV, and it's the dumbest thing of all time.
It is the dumbest shit I've ever seen. Yeah, there's no...
My kids love it, but...
There's no guarantee that you're going to get paid to do what you love anywhere in life, right? That's just not how life works. So I wonder if... you're talking about changing culture. What exactly about the culture are you intending to change? Because you can get together with your friends right now and go play football anytime you want. No one's stopping you from doing that.
You don't think it changed culture when I went toe-to-toe and played football against men? You don't think it changed culture?
Well, I'm asking you. I can't prove a negative.
Female coach in the National Football League.
I can't prove a negative. So tell me how it changed culture.
Let me finish.
Yeah, I asked you a question. You're asking me a question in return. I'm gonna volley it back to you. Tell me how it changed culture. I'm curious.
How it changes culture. Okay. The expectation of where you can or cannot have people in our society has traditionally been shifted through sports. Integration, racial integration, where did that shift? Through sports. Okay? It was used in South Africa. It was here to integrate football. It was here to integrate basketball. So if we talk about gender equality, yes, it's going to shift in sports as well. And to have America's game only be for half of America? No, that's not equality. That's not culture. So yes, you can change a lot of perceptions through sports. Think about the narrative that they used to have. I'm interviewing Warren Moon later. The narrative that they used to have about African Americans in football, that they weren't smart enough to play quarterback. How did that get shifted? It got shifted through playing the game and setting the example of playing it the right way. And for teammates to get to be on the same field and appreciate that they were better together and their differences weren't actually disadvantages, they were advantages. It takes sometimes being on the same field with people. And we say game recognizes game, right? Us being on the same field, we can see that we think a lot more alike than we do differently. We can see it. Oh yeah, that was a great call. Here, we can do this. Oh man, you know ball. Yeah, I know ball. You know ball. And that's not a gender thing. That's a knowledge thing. That's a work thing. That's a talent thing. And yes, seeing those things and answering those questions as opposed to avoiding them, it shifts culture. Now, does it change everybody's mind? No. But does it have the opportunity to? Yeah, it absolutely does.
But well, you say that America's game was only America's game for half of Americans. About 9.41% of the human beings that live in America right now have played in the NFL. So
it's not about the NFL. It's about if you're a boy, you can play. If you're a girl, you can't.
Right.
There are not opportunities. So whether or not you took it to the highest level or not, or whether or not you even decided to play, someone else decided for us that we could play.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure there have been some women that in the high school, maybe even the college level, could have competed, but not. We're talking about like the NFL at this point, right?
Yeah, but we're also talking about whether or not you have the right to play. And correct. See, for most of us as women, we weren't even given the opportunity to play, whether or not you wanted us to play against guys or we wanted to play, women's football. The opportunities weren't there. So that culturally is inequitable at its core. And so, yes, shifting culture means whether or not we want to play where now, okay, flag football is a varsity sport in college. You can get an NAIA scholarship to go play varsity sport as a female. That is shifting culture. And that is changing where America's game, football, could be played by women, yes, against women. It doesn't have to be against the guys. It doesn't have to be taking their spots. But why are we saying this is the greatest game there is, the greatest show on turf, all of these things, and saying as long as it's just guys doing it?
Right. Well, yeah, certainly not. And I don't think it would be you taking, if you were capable of playing in the NFL, it wouldn't be taking a guy's spot. I mean,
But
somebody. Well, that's fucking stupid.
Yeah, I think
like
it's
people
stupid
who
too.
are better
The
than other
best-
people take their spots too. But
The best should be
you're not
the
guaranteed
best,
anything. Sports is.
But that used to be okay. But that used to be the race objection, right? We've done this through society. The way we keep people out is they just don't get the opportunity, and then once they do, you see it on merit, and you can't say, oh, this can't possibly work anymore.
Right.
But if you knew how hard it was to open these doors, what I've done for the last 20 some odd years of my life, it shifts culture quite a bit. And it is hard. And you do get pushback at every step of the way. But if no one's willing to go through it and nobody's willing to change it, then it never changes.
So what would your dream be ultimately? That, growing up for boys and girls, there would be two separate leagues and girls could have the opportunity to play football in every city across America?
For sure. I don't think that the ultimate test or testament of a woman's ability should be whether or not she has the opportunity to compete against a man. If you want to play, you should be able to play, right? And be the very best that you can. Take it to the highest level. Get to love it the same way that the boys do. Get to grow up with the dream of, catching a pass, running a route, scoring a touchdown, having fans cheer for you. That's not too much to ask.
No, not at all. And
even the vast majority of men can't compete at even the junior varsity high school level, right? You remember
But they
high
have
school.
the opportunity to try.
Certainly, they have the opportunity to try, but we're talking about this is. I'm not sure.
Extreme. I'm saying give them the opportunity to have the dream. Those boys, whether or not they top out in junior high or not, they could still have that dream when they're a kid, and they could chase it as far as they want to.
And
that's what we're talking about.
Is there enough women out there though that actually want to do it? And I'm asking as a serious question because I don't know the answer.
Probably, right?
Freaking literally, there are.
I don't know.
There are
Yeah.
professional women's rugby leagues. I would assume there would be the same amount of people. Like women like to play sports just as much as anybody else, I would imagine.
Football though it's just
It's particularly brutal, yeah.
Yeah.
And unless you're at the absolute highest level, it doesn't pay you anything.
But you're not just doing it because of getting paid.
No, for sure.
No,
But
no,
the reason,
not at all.
The reason the U.S.
The
reason the U.S. women's national soccer team is so much better than the men's and so much better than a lot of the other international teams is because the vast majority of professional female athletes that are intent on performing at the highest possible level they can go to either soccer or the WNBA, right? That's pretty much all that exists. Opportunity-wise, you can call it whatever you want, but those leagues exist, right? That's why we're so good at those particular sports,
right?
Like on the international level,
right?
Against everybody else. It's different. We talk about this all the time. It's different for men here because the talent pool for men is divested into 1,000 different things, athletically speaking.
Yeah, and by the way, the reason we ask again is more so out of curiosity because I have two boys, for example, right? I'm having a hard time finding a tackle football league to put them in, simply because CTE, head injuries, all that stuff. They want the kids to essentially play flag football up until 8th grade and then hop into pads and do it. I've coached a bunch of my son's teams, baseball, soccer, all that stuff. There isn't too many women, girls who are either crossing over to a soccer team because, women's soccer already exists, girls soccer already exists, or T-ball or something like that, for example. And I haven't seen too many in flag football. Did you growing up?
You haven't seen too many in flag football?
No, not at all. But I'm in Texas, so I don't know. maybe
Texas
it's
is
different.
behind. Texas is behind in flag. That is 100%
That's weird though,
correct.
isn't it? It's like it seems like Texas and Florida are the two places in the United States where football is like life and culture.
It's the best recruits. It's the best recruits in the nation.
It seems odd to me. Like I think there have been professional women's rugby teams here, but it's odd to me that there isn't more of a system for women to play something like that, right?
Yeah. So we never had one come through the system.
Although I guess
so
the soccer teams here are big, right? TCU's got a big team. There's a lot of really big, like powerful soccer programs here in Texas, so maybe that's where all the talent goes. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
So
Yeah.
I'll give you a big comparison for football. Being from Florida, football has been, or flag football has been, a varsity sport for girls in Florida since 1999.
Oh, okay. All right.
Those girls
cool.
ball. Like, I dare you to go down there and not see the best of the best in terms of girls playing football. So it has been one there. Now, I mean, I've done 38 girls football camps across the country, right? That's been a huge thing that I've been driving. The NAIA just had its first season last year with varsity collegiate flag football. And several of those girls had come out of my programs. If you look at 14U girls right now, playing in some of the biggest competitions across the country, you will see ballers. Look at the Apex Predators out of Vegas. If you want to see great girls flag football, you actually have one of the best in Texas. It's the Texas Fury. Check those girls out. They ball. And there are more and more girls all the time who want to play. The trick is that before that, they were never, ever given the opportunity to decide that they wanted to play.
Right, but there's no infrastructure for that. And here's what I mean. You may say that it's not about them getting paid, and you're probably right. I think the vast majority of women who get into athletics assume they're not going to because of the lack of opportunity. But the opportunity in college and NFL football is that it makes a fuckload of money. The reason that the vast majority of other varsity sports exist at these major universities is because the college football program subsidizes all of it. They don't make any money, and fields cost money, jerseys cost money, your time costs money, coaching costs money, referees cost, all of this costs money. So I think there's certainly a level of misogyny involved in this, but there's also a level of the fact that there's no top level organization that makes money that subsidizes all the rest of this stuff. That's how that works. That's a supply chain, right? Like young boys in Texas are a supply chain item to the NFL or to college football.
Just FYI, last year the NFL pledged, in partnership with Nike, pledged $5 million to the development of high school girls collegiate flag football.
Right, but that's virtue signaling. That's virtue signaling. That doesn't actually benefit them in any way other than socially.
Because you need a lot more than $5 million.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, it's the same with the WNBA. They've never made they've not made $1 ever. Like they're entirely subsidized by the NBA. And I don't know why. Like everybody got butthurt when Shaq talked about lowering the rim, but they use a smaller ball. What's the difference? Like people want to see exciting shit.
Yeah.
Whether it's dunking or blocks or tackles, whatever
so let's back up, because you're putting a lot of things on a lot of things, and a lot of them I would interject on.
Sure.
Number one, the WNBA is exciting to watch. If you look at the vantage point of what makes the WNBA great, it's actually the teamwork, the passing, ball maneuvering, and yes, some of them can dunk. But if that was your first exposure to basketball, and then you watch the guys' game through that lens, you would say, why don't they pass more? So it's not,
I don't think that's true. I mean, nobody wants to see Princeton pass the ball 15 times and then take a three-pointer like back in '99.
But when you do appreciate the game, like you do actually appreciate the way that they play it.
Maybe.
Why
I mean, but you're talking
of how to play the game, the lens through which the guys play it.
It's true.
Not everybody thinks that that's the best way to play it.
No,
That's
for sure.
your opinion. That's fine.
Well, that's the majority opinion, the people that spend money on the game, right? So we had this conversation.
You are not the one who's making the decision for the majority of people who play money for the game. I don't understand why this is getting
the viewers
girls
are
versus boys conversation.
Well,
it's
it's not about that, because there are other
all day.
There are women's sports that are like soccer, for example, in America, they get watched way more than the men's sports do because they're better at it, right? It's just how it is. So I'm not trying to say what everybody thinks. What I'm saying is the dollar speaks louder than anything else. When people will spend their money on what they want to see, and they're not spending their money on these versions of women's sports. Just how it is, right? So
okay, well, I'm going to encourage you to go to look at the research from the Fan Project, which has actually looked at this from a data perspective. Part of the reason why you don't get the same consumption of women's sports that you get to men is that 0.4% of media coverage goes to women in sports. 0.4% of dollars in sponsorships are dedicated to women in sports. But when you look at alternative streaming platforms and some of those, the numbers flip. So part of it is the chicken or the egg. Oh, well, we don't watch women's sports, but you also don't show the same highlights of women's sports. You don't get the same exposure, which means you don't have the same eyeballs and the same opportunities for people to become fans. So it's not fair to compare them and say, oh, we just don't like this or we're not watching it. They also don't have the same points of exposure to be able to look at them and make a choice.
Right, but
you don't have
life's
the same
not fair.
exposure to posters and all of those things.
For sure.
There's a lot of societal socialization mechanisms that you're not taking into account in your argument. Right.
Well, maybe, but I mean, my argument isn't that women's sports are intrinsically inferior to men's. I don't give a shit about that. That's meaningless to me. It is an economic meritocracy. People will either spend money on it or they won't. Right? Everybody knows that these things exist, and if they don't care. You know what I mean? People, the vast majority of people are not hardcore fans of any particular sport. We talked about this last week with UFC. The vast majority of people aren't extreme fight fans. They want to see people get knocked the fuck out. The vast majority of baseball fans don't care that base running is now at an all-time worst since we've been recording data. Base runners suck now. They're not paying attention. Their fundamentals are shit. And the chances are people who are not as athletically talented as these people would be better at those fundamentals, and the WNBA is an example of that. But the vast majority of people who are fans that spend money on this stuff and develop and build the infrastructure for it do not care about fundamentals. They care about dunks, knockouts, home runs, big hits, etc.
Actually incorrect. When you talk about consumption in that way, you're talking about how guys consume sports and how guys become sports fans. You're not talking about females. The research says that women want to see behind the helmet. They want to see the person that plays the game. And if you don't have exposure to those personalities, if the storytelling isn't there, if we're not looking beyond just the stats, then if the women, especially if they didn't play the game and haven't been socialized to it the same way, they're not tuning in. So the consumption and the fan development is fundamentally different for female in sports than it is for men, which means if they're not getting the media exposure and they're not getting told the stories, then you're not getting them as fans, because if they didn't grow up playing the sport, then just a dunk or just the stats aren't going to turn it on or off for them. And by the way, 87% of the purchasing power lies with women. So when you're talking about jersey sales and ticket sales, might want to get on board to how the women become fans and how they consume it. Guys are the ones that will have the same jersey for about 30 years when it used to fit them. Women, not the same story.
Okay, well, that's not reflected in the economy of sports in any way. I'm sorry. Like, I understand what you're saying might be true in a sense, but the facts are that the women aren't spending that money on stuff. And if they are, they're doing it. I've worked in marketing for a very long time. It's some very, very large companies, and women typically buy shit. 63% of all household purchases are made by women, right? The vast majority of them. But about half of those purchases are made on behalf of their spouse. So you convince the woman that the man thinks it's cool, she buys it for him. That's typically how it works. And if you're a male-dominated industry, that's how
even
you,
in
that's how you sell
podcasting,
it.
by the way, our female shows on our network book out faster than the men because it's the women buying.
Women are better at selling shit, frankly.
Yeah.
And you're onto something for sure when it comes to the narrative and the storytelling not being very good. The WNBA has existed for 25 years. The average age of a WNBA player is 27. They were 2 years old when this league started, and they still haven't made a dime off of this. So it's not like people don't know. Everybody knows that the WNBA exists. For the last 10 years or so, ESPN's made it a point to do that. And I think, good for them for doing it. But where's the result? Where are the dollars going into female sports anywhere? If women are making 87% of purchases, if they're 87% of the purchasing power, and they want to be involved in sports, where is the result of that? Where is the evidence of any of that existing that you're talking about?
Why don't you look at female merchandise growth versus male?
Look at what now?
I'm sorry?
Female fan merchandise growth in purchasing and consumption versus male.
Oh, well, look, that I know, and I have the answer for. So Alyssa Milano actually was the one who cracked the code on that with the Dodgers, and then she got in all the jerseys, and that is correct. Because, yes, with the jerseys and everything else, dudes will wear shit for 30 years, and that's totally true. I still have the same Ohio State gear that I had in college. It still fits, and I still wear it to the games. With women, I think you have an opportunity to treat it more like fashion, where you're able to build cooler jerseys and retros and throwbacks and all that other stuff. And women will definitely buy that. But as far as a product on the field, sports-wise, when you have these flashy knockouts and goals and everything like Dan was talking about earlier, I mean, take Amanda Nunes in the UFC, Ronda Rousey.
I think pound for pound, she's probably the most dominant fighter on earth right now.
Oh yes,
because I can't think of if John Jones fought Francis Ngannou, I could see Ngannou winning that fight maybe. Right. If anybody on earth fought
Amanda right now,
Nunes, I don't know of a woman that I would even think that they would beat her. If she got beat by anybody else in her weight class, I would be shocked.
But the point is, like, somebody like her or Ronda Rousey put asses in the seats because of their knockouts, because of these short clips, because of the attention span of average American kids.
And I'm not just talking about
they
women.
just want to see like an 18-second clip on Twitter of some crazy knockout or a dunk or something like that. But look, it's for the same reason.
I say that women can't do those kinds of things. I've got some great tackles for you could turn on. There's some knockout punches there. I mean, but you also have to get the same exposure. And so when 4% of the media coverage goes to women in sports, that's a problem. That means people aren't having the same opportunity to develop the fan base.
Well, how much of
it is chicken and the egg, right? Part of that is a systemic problem, and that is a systemic problem.
How much
is a problem.
How much of the total recorded sports happening on video, for example, are male versus female though? Like if just for argument's sake, if 4% of all the sports being played are by women,
nobody listens.
If 4% of all the sports at the professional level are being played by women and 96% by men, then that distribution makes sense, right? I mean, this is a math problem. Well, how do you know? Where's the data?
It's not a sports distribution. It's also an exposure problem. 4%, you're going to argue with me? Like on 4%? That's a known stat.
I'm talking about, no, I don't know the stat. I assume you're right about it. That's not what I'm questioning. I'm questioning whether the total output of produced content of sports, does 4% represent the amount that women produce, or is it something different?
But you're talking produced content versus sports media coverage, okay?
You can only cover, you cover what is made. Like we record the shows we make and then we put them out. We don't there's no other information to put out. That's not how that works. You know what I mean? If 96% of something is this and 4% is this, then that's how much you're going to report on it.
There's not 4% of sports being played by women.
Well, where's the data though? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, what is the number then? Is what he's asking. What is the number for women's sports?
You'll have to bear with me. I'm very autistic. I need numbers for any of this to make sense.
Yeah, some of these are genuine questions. By the way,
they're all genuine questions.
We don't know. Well, no, I mean some of them are facetious. No,
I think some of it is facetious.
No. We're totally fucking. No, he's being totally serious.
I'm fucking. All I care about in life is math. If the numbers make sense, then it makes sense to me. And these numbers that you're telling me, maybe they make sense, maybe they don't, but I don't know. If 4% of the content generated is female, then 4% distribution in the media.
Of the content generated. But I will say that one of the things I was trying to say is the development of a fan base, right, from a female standpoint, needs more extended storytelling. And that is one thing that has fallen short.
Well, do you think like 30 for 30 changes that at all? 30 for 30 and some of the HBO stuff with those guys, that probably has some effect, you would think, if women like the storytelling thing.
Even if you look at, so let's not talk male versus women, like female in terms of the sports. Let's just put that like asleep for a second.
Sure.
Development of fan base of even female fan consumption among males in sports comes through generally extended storytelling. If they're not the hardcore, I played the sport, because a lot of women didn't have the opportunity to play the same sports, right? It comes through the extended narrative of the player. I want to know who he is in his life. And so when you tell those stories, yes, it absolutely increases the fandom, right? So the same logic can be extended to, if you just say this is how they develop fans, it is psychologically, they want to know the story. That's all. So where they consume merchandise is like, they want, it's not just the brand or a price break. They want it to believe in something. They want it to mean something. When I wear this jersey, it's not just this guy had the most tackles. It's like, oh man, did you see what he did with his daughter? Right? Like think about Leah Strong and some of those phenomenon. It was not only is this guy a great player, but he is a great person. And that is an important element that we can expand fan base and sports consumption through inviting people to know the people in it. And this is something that even struggles from people who wear a helmet versus who don't, because we don't get to see their face. We don't get to see their facial expressions.
That was a big problem in the NFL in the 90s. A lot of the Players Association was super pissed about that in the 90s, about how players were required to keep their helmets on at the sidelines and nobody ever saw their face. So when they did a commercial, nobody gave a shit. Right?
Yeah.
Because they don't know who they are.
But who's at fault here? I mean, we talk about, it's easy to blame some kind of systemic misogyny or lack of opportunity, but the WNBA has existed for 25 years. They've had all the opportunities they need to tell their stories, but nobody gives a shit, right? So what?
Well, I wouldn't say, okay, first of all, they haven't had the same opportunities because they haven't had the same resources behind, right? Wherever you
But where do resources come from? Resources come because people watch the stuff. Like, you're not entitled to be a professional basketball player.
No. Lots of NBA teams lose money. You have billionaires, boys clubs owners who don't need it to turn a profit the same way that you do in a lot of the ownership groups that are owning women's sports.
Right.
They're not necessarily coming from that billionaire fund, which does mean they are at a fundamental disadvantage, whether or not it's profitable or not. So you can't make that argument.
Well, I certainly can, because sports is a business, right?
Right. But
if it's not profitable, it goes away.
They can lose money. No. If they can come in and they lose money, this is a point of pride. This is a toy. And the women's ownership group doesn't have money to burn at the same extent, then no, they're not on equal footing to go with consumption, because consumption is also driven by investment.
But don't you think the sports needs superstars? Like, if there was a woman who came out and just started dunking all over everyone, like, to me, because, like, I don't give a shit about like male or female or whatever it is. I just want to see the most exciting shit. Like, I would pay just the same amount of money to watch Ronda Rousey as I would to watch Conor McGregor, just because she was so exciting.
Yes, she was.
I can't, like, because outside of soccer, track and field, gymnastics, Simone Biles, like, I'm amped about her in the Olympics this summer. I think it's going to be amazing. I can't name any WNBA players that have captured my attention or the rest of America's attention to warrant that type of media coverage. And I guess that's where I'm going with the female football league as well. Do you think it would benefit if you guys had a social media team to show some of your hits?
Absolutely.
Like, I'd love to see, like, do you have reels up of yourself on YouTube knocking chicks out? Like,
they exist. Unfortunately, I wish I was there in the social media era when they could have been reported to the same extent and with the same quality. Right? Like, we didn't have access to the same camera work. We weren't getting produced for television. So that is, again, a chicken and the egg scenario. But when we talk about shifting culture, Ronda Rousey absolutely shifted the culture of MMA, because Dana White at one point said he would never have a female fighter. So when we talk about culture shifts, yes, it requires people to do it. It requires them to be the person out front, which means taking arrows from the front and the back. So yes, all sports benefit from having superstars. All sports benefit from being able to afford social media teams, to have better camera crews, to have all of those things. They also benefit from developing fan base by being able to do things for the youth, right? Like, but those things also take time to build up, and they take resources. Now, wherever you get them, those things are different. But yes, you are absolutely correct. Any sport benefits from a superstar. MMA was changed forever, whether you like her or don't, by the existence of Ronda Rousey. Right. Every one of these women who is knocking folks out with huge crowds to this day, even if they don't love Ronda Rousey, they should really thank her, because she fought before it was sexy, right? Like, and that means it's hard. And for any of us who have come out in front, like, it's hard for us. And it does take people who are hard-nosed and willing to do it for no money, and willing to do it for the sacrifice, and willing to do it because we have a fundamental belief and a passion that we can shift culture, and that it's not just what we do, it's who we are in the world, and believing that we can through passion, power, and purpose, create a world where the girls born now don't have to look at sports as a place that they don't belong to the same extent, that they can grow up with those same dreams. That's what the goal is. That our fight is so that they don't have to fight the same way.
Yeah, for
Doesn't
sure.
mean it won't be hard, but the permission to dream and even seeing things on TV and being able to be exposed to being able to buy someone's jersey, right? And wear it. Like, as a girl, if you can't see someone who's like you, then where do you get the belief that that's what you can do?
Here's what I wonder, and this goes back to a math problem. I'm not trying to be reductive or anything, but what percentage of women want to be athletic or dream of making the game-winning catch or hitting a home run in the bottom of the ninth versus the percentage of men who do that? So we're talking about purchasing power, right? But that is
women are shown to the same extent that their pursuit in sports is as valuable as the guys.
Okay. That's not the question I asked. So
let
me finish my fucking question. Jesus Christ.
Please don't cuss at me. I don't need you to cuss at me.
Great.
What I'm saying is that your ability
this is
to
my
drink
show.
this
Can we cut this off, please? Let's just end this shit because I'm not gonna. We'll finish later with this. This is nonsense. I'm not gonna be talked over. Just trying to have a conversation with you, and you want your shit to move forward. This is not the fucking way to do it, frankly. Sorry.
And you think it's okay to cuss at me? Like,
I swear, fuck is a comma for me. I was in the military, for Christ's sake. I'm not being a dick to you. This is how I talk. Like, that's pretty thin skin for somebody that's trying to change life and all this stuff, change culture. Let's get fucking adult about this.
I mean, did you not hear any language like that in the NFL?
not like, let's fucking this. Yeah. Like, as if it was just a part of the conversation, but not directly to me being like, I shouldn't have a point.
No one said you shouldn't have a point, but you really shouldn't jump in when somebody else is talking and just start talking over them to make a point that has nothing to do with what I was saying, right? That's not really how a conversation works.
The proportion of where girls can dream in this world, it is impacted by what we show and see.
Yeah, it absolutely is. That's not the point I was making. The point I was making is right now as a business, what percentage of women care about being that versus what percentage of men? Because it affects purchasing power. If 87% of women, if 87% of purchasing power is by women, that's fine. But what is their motivation for purchasing? Is it to buy stuff for the men in their life because they like the sport? Is it because they actually like it? Is it because they aspire to it? These are motivations that matter in marketing. And if you don't know them, then you can't make money. And none of this shit is going to change without money. It never, ever. It will never change without money. That's why nobody watches the WNBA. Right? They have done a terrible job at marketing their product. There are people in the league that weren't born yet when this started, right? And that's how old it is at this point. I just don't understand how. I don't understand the expectation that everyone should just be able to do whatever they want. Like your point before was that billionaires aren't spending money on women's sports. That's because nobody watches them. It's not because. There's no clout there. If it's about clout, then that's what it is, right?
But I didn't say that billionaires aren't spending money on women's sports.
Well,
but what
they're
I
not.
said is, if a billionaire, which a lot of them do, and some of these teams lose money, okay? Some of the men's teams lose money. So if we're making the money argument, a billionaire can afford to take that hit because there's a different motivation in owning that team. A lot of the women who own the teams don't have a billionaire background.
Well, there's 100 female
hit.
billionaires in the United States, first of all. So I don't know what that is, but the idea that professional sports teams on a year-to-year basis lose money, that's absolutely true. But viewership grows, the cost per eyeball grows. So if over the last 15 years, Manchester United had lost $100 million a year, they would still be worth 10 times that much based on how much they were worth before, just because of the way that it's like a mortgage. Property, like equity grows in that. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But equity is not growing in the WNBA. They continue to cost money, right? It's not about losing $100 million this year as a professional sports team and being able to handle that because you're a billionaire. You buy the team. I buy the Red Sox today for $4 billion. In 15 years, it's going to be worth $10 billion. So it doesn't matter if I lose $100 million a year. It's still an investment that makes sense. These are businessmen. They're not throwing their money away. That's just not. That premise is not true.
But I'm not saying that they threw their money away. But if you have a surplus of money, then that is an an investment that you can make in that way. Unfortunately, the ownership groups of a lot of women's franchises traditionally, and it's getting better, have not had that same surplus, right? And that means that, you know, yes, we would love to spend money in this way, but they may be handicapped on what that backlog is to be able to develop forward.
For sure.
That's all I'm saying.
But that's what an economic meritocracy is, right?
But is it a meritocracy if the guys are starting with billions and the women are starting with hundreds?
It's a meritocracy because the viewers watch the men's sports and they don't watch the women's sports.
And there is women who are billionaires, so why aren't they spending money on women? Like the girl from Spanx, for example. And I know that's a shitty example. I just happen to be watching Shark Tank.
Incredibly generous, though. She gave away like half of her wealth.
Totally. But like, are you calling on women like her to step up and give more money?
I would love to see her get involved. Now, and I say involved because of this. You need money and you need that badass businesswoman, right? Like being able to even have access to sit in some of the rooms, right? Like, I mean, you need all of those components. And I don't say it's one of the things that has been one of the core things that I've learned from is being around these guys, honestly, and being able to learn how they did business versus what I was taught we were allowed to even think in the sport.
That's a big problem right there because you're absolutely right about that. That's a huge problem. For whatever reason, over the last 100 years or so, we have assigned these traits of business to men. That's you have to act like a man in business. No, you have to do business in business. That's how you do business. It's not masculine or feminine. It just is. That's what the fuck it is. And we have a tendency, if something is male dominated or any of the other majority group dominated, to assign that as an intrinsic value to that particular group of people. That is not true. That is how you do that. There's a way to chop a fucking tree down, right?
Right.
And it's not a male way or a female way. You chop down the tree.
If I never met a lumberjack, I'm probably going to be pretty awkward trying to chop down the tree.
For sure, right? So the solution isn't to expect anything at all, but rather to do what other people are doing that's already successful, right?
Look, I love being invited into the room.
Yeah, but the expectation should be that you should be in the room or you should be invited to the room always. That should be the expectation. That's not the point. The point is that the idea that we're going to remake the game. Well, we're going to do this, but for women, that doesn't make sense. That thing exists because it exists. It's successful because it exists, right? Or I'm sorry, it exists because it is successful. So trying to reinvent the wheel is not a good idea. That's why I like the fact that you got involved in the actual NFL and didn't just go try to start some new league off the bat.
Yeah, you're one of the few people who is actually trying to make the change. I just don't know that there's enough women like you who are trying to make this change. Because, I mean, look, you were the first female NFL coach. How did that even happen, for example? I mean, how did you get pitched? Did you pitch yourself? Because it seems so fucking crazy that, like, who did that for you? Who made that call? Or how did you get the call?
So it happened because I played with the guys, literally. Like, because we were on the same field every day, doing the same things, I learned to be a better teammate with them, right? Like, I went from being one of the best in the world to now all of a sudden I'm scratching and clawing and fighting to, whether it's to survive. And it's not, I didn't bang down the door of them, right? They came to me. They actually wanted to use me as a publicity stunt. And I told them where they could take that offer and shove it. And I said, if you want to do anything with me, I either do everything the guys do, step for step, hit for all of it, or I do nothing because it's insulting. And if I was any one of the guys on your team, I would hate it. And I'm not going to be your PR stunt. And as soon as I said it, I was like, okay, I might have just gotten myself killed. Okay. Because I had been outspoken my whole career. I would never play football against men. But sometimes when your back's against the wall, I think a lot of the times, you just have to get better. And so not only did I go through a day of training camp, but I went through all of training camp and became the first female to play an entire season in men's pro football as a non-kicker. But what happened in the process is we got good together, right? Like I learned to be better with the guys. They learned to be better with me. We got to know each other. Look, my dad's from Jersey. If I knew that fuck was like very for you, we would be fine. But on the first time we're having a conversation and we're in an emotionally charged conversation, that's tough because I don't know your normal vocabulary, right? We've not gotten to sit at a bar. So I don't know if, you know, that's your language with everybody or if it's me specifically. And that's harder, right? But we got through that.
Yeah, I will say that really is Dan's everywhere.
Right.
So yeah,
But
you're good to go on that
If I knew
one.
that going in, I'd be like, hey, slow your fucking roll, have a drink, take a second and listen to me.
Well, I'm not
right?
going to slow my
But
roll. First of all, let's go back to that because you were talking over
Wait.
me, and that's the reason I said it. So let's not write that whole history. But anyways, yeah, there's something called the principle of charity. It's a first century Jewish principle that says you give the most generous interpretation of somebody's words as possible. So I keep asking you questions. You keep thinking I'm asking you negative questions. I'm asking you questions because our fans want to hear your thoughts on it, right? It's not because I'm trying to challenge your worldview or anything like that. You got to relax.
But here's the thing. First of all, the relaxed comment is tough.
Why?
Because actually, no. Because actually, when you say that in a conversation, you're basically telling somebody that their way of coming into the situation has been incorrect. And this isn't a subject I can relax to. This is my life's work.
Right.
Now, what I will say is that it is the escalation of the conversation that made my interpretation take on that way because I didn't hear anything to the contrary. So it felt like an escalated narrative to me that was going more towards what I thought is like we were coming to chill out, hang out, like have a chill sports conversation. And this is intense.
This is a chill sports conversation for me, though.
Yeah.
So, you
Well,
know.
For Dan, it's pretty chill.
I don't think if you're trying to make cultural and systemic change here, your emotions have no place in the conversation. I'm not saying that to be critical.
Whoa. Anytime you say somebody's emotions don't have a role in the conversation, then you're not thinking about one that has been somebody's mission in driving in life. Because I wouldn't do all of this if it didn't mean something.
No, I get it. For sure, your drive and you leveraging your emotions toward that drive have made you successful, but in a conversation trying to debate the facts of the case or lay them out.
Yeah, but I'm also giving you facts of the case. So let's not go backwards, though. Let's table this and move forward, because I would really appreciate that.
Sure. So what was that conversation like when you got to Arizona?
Well, it didn't start in Arizona.
Oh, I apologize. Yeah.
Yep. So having played on the guys team,
Yep.
We got really close. A new head coach came in the following season. He saw how we responded to each other. He sat me down and started grilling me about football, what was good with the team last year, all of these things. And I impressed him just off football. And Wendell's reaction was, you got to coach my football team. And I instinctively said no, because it's not something I had ever thought that I could do. Never had aspired to coach because there were no women coaching in men's pro football. And I am really thankful to Wendell because he would not let me turn it down. He actually took the job on my behalf and told me about it. And once I got into coaching, I saw that I knew probably more than I had thought I did, but didn't have a role model in that space, didn't know how it could happen. So when I was coaching in indoor, and Sarah Thomas was hired as the first full-time female ref in NFL history, a reporter asked Bruce Arians if he could ever see a female coaching in the NFL. And his response was pretty simple. That's the kind of guy BA is. He said, the second a woman proves she can make these guys better, she'll be hired. So I talked to my head coach about it. He said, basically like, we should call Bruce. Can you get me his number? And I was like, dude, didn't you play in the NFL? Like, don't you guys have Black Book or something? Like I had no real like connection to that level at that time. But he challenged me. So I ended up calling the Cardinals on behalf of myself, as if I wasn't myself. That day I was his assistant, calling to let BA know that though it was not in the NFL, there was already a woman coaching in men's pro football, and that the head coach of the Texas Revolution would like to talk to him about it. So he eventually called him back and said, tell me about this girl, and asked a bunch of questions, and then eventually invited me out to OTAs and then to join the staff after a few interviews.
And this is the Arizona Cardinals. That's what I was referring to earlier. But what was the conversation like with Bruce Arians? Do you sit down with him and he interviews you? Is it like Hard Knocks? How does that work?
So the first thing I remember about Bruce Arians was he has this way about him to make everybody feel like they belong. Here I am, I'm walking out to OTAs, the only girl. So it's like, I don't know where I fit. I don't even know where on the sidelines I'm supposed to go. He walks over and he brings me over and he said, "Hey coach, see these guys here on the bikes? You know what that is?" I was like, "No, what is it?" And he goes, "These guys work really fast or really hard about running really fast at the combine. And everybody falls in love with this 40 time. And then they get out here and they forget that they have to play football and they get hurt. And then they're on the bikes and they're no good to me." So he's cutting jokes from like minute one. And I was like, and then he's telling me about all of the elements, right? Mm-hmm. And welcomes me in. He asked me about the PhD, asked me about my dissertation, what the team's like, some different things. And then asked me, he's like, "Hey, I got to get to work. Will you stay to the end of practice?" And because that's the only time we could actually sit down. So then after that, it was in the cafeteria, sits me down, interviews me, wants to know about women's football because he really wasn't aware, wants to know what my responsibilities are with the current team, how I had gotten there, working with the linebackers, really wanted to know what the interpersonal dynamics were like. And asked me a lot of questions about sports psychology and PhD. So really went through past history, present focus, and philosophy and leadership skills, and that. And then he did a bunch of interviews with other people who were around me, I think, to get a better feel like that. So you kind of had all of it, like the exposure and then more of your hardcore interview and then checking out other people who know you.
And when did you find out that you got hired? Did he call you personally? Did an agent call you? How did that work out?
Yeah, never talked to any agents, anybody else. It was always BA and I. He had actually told me to, stay in contact with him, let him know how our season was going, because I was right in the middle of coaching indoor football at that time. I was a little hesitant to call him because he's kind of a busy guy. And he said, keep him up to date on the season. And so we had gotten to the championship game. I figured that was a good enough reason to call him. He was out on the golf course. And I said, "Hey, coach, I just wanted to let you know we're in the championship." He's like, "Oh, coach, you got a lot of work to do. I'm out here golfing." I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you." He's like, "Nope, I'm already whooping these guys. Don't worry about it. You got a lot of work. Focus on the championship. And by the way, it looks like you'll be joining us in Arizona. So we'll give you details after you make the ship." And he hung up. And I was like, does that mean like it was like a drive-by of good news?
Sure. You're like, did I get the job or did I not get the job?
Right. Like, okay. Like, it was so funny just how nonchalant he was about it. I almost felt like, can I actually trust that? But that's just how BA is. He is, once his decision is made, like it all makes sense to him.
And is there a same salary for all of those coaches at that level? So you already know what you're getting. That goes back to the agent thing. Usually an agent negotiates it, but I don't know how the NFL works as far as like
assistant
the
coaches
coaching.
Have agents?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Do they have agents? And do they, is there or just a flat number that everybody gets?
I would certainly not be the one who would know. Because I was an outsider to that world, right? Like, I mean, the closest I'd ever been to an NFL sidelines at that time was like the nosebleed section. So I didn't know any of the cultural stuff, any of how that is. Normally, I think once you get to like mid to higher kind of on the, I know if you're a coordinator, you definitely have an agent. Some of the more established position coaches get into having agents, and they would handle all that stuff. I didn't have one, so could not speak to the across the board economics.
Gotcha. Yeah, the only one I know of.
Different teams have different numbers, but I have no idea what that looks like.
Yeah, the only one I know of was a buddy from high school. His dad was an offensive line coach, and that was about as far as positional head coaches go. I know they were rich. I just don't know what he made, but he's still doing it to this day. What was the exact title they assigned you when you got there to the Cardinals? What was your official coaching title?
Yeah, I was assistant inside linebackers with Larry Foote.
And were you a linebacker playing pro, and is that why he thought that would be a good fit there?
So I was coaching linebackers for the Revolution at the time.
Yep.
I played a lot of different positions in 15 years, but predominantly linebacker, though more an outside linebacker / speed rush end by trade. Part of the reason he had me work with the inside linebackers was because Larry Foote was a new coach at that time. He had been a player the year before, but got injured, and BA thought he was really talented and a smart player. So, was basically like, hey, you need to stay in this and try this. And he thought the two of us together would be a good dynamic, both in terms of personality and like being able to help him since he was a newer coach as well.
It's why I asked, as far as like going from linebacker to linebacker, you answered the question there, because most of the positional coaches actually played that position in the NFL and or college, and then they flip into it. So that makes sense. What was your first interaction like with the guys once you got in there and you were the first female coach? Were they fucking with you at all, or was everybody pretty polite?
The guys were actually really excited to be a part of history. And some of them welcomed me before I was even there. I think Patrick Peterson definitely did. Kevin Minter. Kevin was in my room the whole time. I almost got stepped on by like Calais Campbell on the first day. So that probably would have been a really bad start. But I literally turned a corner and we like kind of ran into him. So like, I kind of like was right eye to eye with his belly button, because that's about how tall he is. And I just remember this giant man looks down at me and he was like, "Hey coach, I've been looking forward to meeting you." And I was like, all I could think of was Blue Chips.
Yeah, it was Shaq.
And Shaq, like, don't step on the children.
Underrated movie. Take a drink every time he peeks his head out of a door. You'll be rocked by the end of that movie.
I take a peek.
Sure.
I take a drink every time Nick Nolte says "God damn it."
God damn it.
Every single time.
God damn it.
In any movie he's in.
Yeah, that's the.
That's a pretty good impression.
That's my. I have a one-word Nick Nolte impression, and that's it. And it's only the word "God damn it." God damn it.
Nick Nolte.
I don't think I remember any other word he's ever said.
Ever. Weird, right?
Without
what else do you need?
Without the "God damn it," he's just Gary Busey with better hair.
Exactly. Exactly. And then how long did you end up coaching before moving on?
Well, with them, I was with them in preseason and training camp. That's what the contract was. And then the next coaching position I took was as the head coach of the Australian women's national team.
But do you think it opened, like you personally, opened the doors for the woman who was with the 49ers recently? Did she?
Katie Towers.
Yeah. Did she reach out and call you and say thank you? Because without you, none of this would probably be possible, I would imagine.
Well, Katie and I played together, so that was really cool, right? We used to play against each other when she was with the Kansas City Tribe and I was with the Diamonds. So I have tackled her and her twin sister many times. And we played together on the 2013 national team. So it was really, really cool to see her get that opportunity and to know how solid she is, right? Like to know what a great football player in person she is. So yeah, I mean, it's exciting to have opened the door. Like I say, I was a good fullback, right? Like a good lead blocker. And And that's what the job is, of being first, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure she had to have called you and said, "Hey, dude, what's this really like? Like, what am I getting into here?"
We talked about it in person. I saw her, and we talked about it that way. So it wasn't a phone call, but it was at a football game. So yeah,
That's cool.
To know different things.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And now you've got a new podcast here. You had Terrell Owens on. Yeah, you're interviewing Warren Moon today.
Warren is coming on. Yeah, I'm doing. So I partnered with Twitch on Twitch TV, bringing some new sports content to them. Warren Moon will be on today. That's on Game Recognizes Game, and then we have the Juke as well. And just really having some good conversations with football friends. Warren is somebody who he's actually on the back of my book. He's been incredibly supportive of me throughout my career. So really excited to have another good conversation with him today.
That's awesome. How is Twitch, by the way? Are they putting more programming out there? Because
we're learning. And actually it would be great if you guys want to look at extending what you're doing to also bringing it to Twitch. I'd be happy to make an introduction to you.
That's the exact reason we asked. Yeah. Look, that's the exact reason I asked. They always say, "Hey, go to Twitch, go to Twitch, go to Twitch." I just don't know much about it. We've been in podcasting for 7 years at this point.
Yeah, and you guys have a great following and do a great job. So one of their goals is to increase the sports conversations that they have.
Mm-hmm.
So to pull more people into that environment. And because right now, obviously, it's gaming first, but they want to get more into sports specifically. So I think right now we're having more of the interview type conversations, and then it'll be like shifting to obviously during the season, being able to talk about what's going on during the season and, sidecasting the game. So watching with fans so that we can, chop it up and BS about football as it's going on. Because that's a lot of it. It's really big on the chat and the community and being able to be accessible, but they are making a big push into sports. So
that's great.
I'd like to intro you. I got you.
Yeah, absolutely. We do a lot of watch alongs on YouTube right now, but they'll censor for whatever reason. I know Twitch is a little more open to more colorful conversations, at least. And then today with Warren Moon on, I'm sure you'll ask him about him saying, "I got several gay teammates." That was one of the big stories in the last 48 hours.
Yeah, does that come as a surprise to anybody? There are gay people exist, motherfucker.
No, dude. No, zero.
When's the last time a reasonable human being gave a fuck about that, to be honest? I mean, I know people still do and they're assholes for it, but goddamn.
It's been a long time, in my eyes. That's why I don't think anybody really cared when the guy from the Raiders came out the other day and said, "Hey, it's like, nah,
Well,
sweet."
he said it himself. I mean, the ultimate goal is that this is not news.
Yes.
Nobody gives a shit.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's still plenty of hillbillies that care about that.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you look at think about the difference on how his news has been received to, when Michael Sam was gay, like openly gay and being drafted, right? That's a big difference now in terms of being receptive.
Sure it is, but Michael Sam was not an NFL caliber player either, right? I think.
Well, it's a different conversation, but it's the last point, data point that we kind of have.
Yeah.
Right.
We said this the day after Homeboy came out. Like I thought it was a really smart, personal and business decision for him to wait until he made it, quote unquote, because he's a legit NFL player. Like he is a top third of the league at his position player.
Yeah, and
nobody can say like it with Michael Sam, like, "Oh, this is a publicity stunt," whatever. You can't say that about this guy. Like he is a fucking very, very good football player.
Yeah, absolutely. Jen, tell everybody where they can find you.
At JWelter47 on Twitter, Welter47 on Instagram, Dr. Jen Welter on Twitch, and my website is jenwelter.com.
Awesome. Look, we appreciate you being here today. We actually enjoy spirited conversations like this. I hope you took no offense to it, because what you did is truly historic, and you put your money where your mouth is as far as, where you think women should be at the table there. So we appreciate you being on today.
Well, look, what I appreciate is guys that will have the conversations, because we don't change anything if we just sit there and think we know all the answers or think that we know how to convey it, right? If you don't have different opinions, if I don't have them and we can't get into it, then guess what? It's just going to sit on the shelf, and a lot of people cry in their Cheerios.
Yeah.
I was taught very early on, especially in the world of football, that if it means something to you, coach, you have to be willing to stand on the table, and you can't let somebody knock you off the table. Otherwise, your opinion didn't mean anything in the first place. And so, yeah, I'm going to push back, because I look at it as like, when you get put into conversations, whether or not I'm always the one who wants to have them, I wouldn't consider myself an authority in basketball, period. Right? Like, it was not my sport. I played a lot of them. That wasn't the one. But if I can have a conversation that might help move the needle for them, I will. If that's a question that I'm asked, is it my first go-to? No, because it's not my sport. But if we're going to be in these conversations, and you're going to be in a position where people are asking you a question, do your best to learn about it. If you can learn more, do it. And have to stand on the table, though, because if you don't, then who's going to? Because you were the only one invited into the conversation. So knowing all the guys that I love and respect, they have strong opinions. I do too. We have to talk about them. If we don't, then nothing changes. And, I'll be wrong on some of it. I'll be right on some of it. But if we can't really get into it, then we're not going to get anything from it. So
I 100% agree. And thank you for being here today. Check Jen out on the Juke podcast. And I feel like you're everywhere, Twitch and everywhere else. So please give her a follow as well. For D'Anthony Hollaway, I'm Ross Patterson. This is Drinkin' Bros Sports. Good night, everyone.